So thank you everyone for joining this morning. Obviously I know most of you guys very well, Sarah, Gav in particular, and Steve, I know you're one of Stephen's customers, so welcome along as well. So this is just going to be probably an introduction for most of you. We've spoke to probably most of you about Sicon Manufacturing as an alternative to Sage 200 manufacturing, and this will be a sort of introduction to Sicon's version of the product and what's going to be being used going forward. So I'll pass over to Sarah now, who knows the product a lot more than me, and to kind of take over and take you through the demonstration or the webinar.
Perfect, lovely. Good morning. So I think first things first, what I would suggest is if I could get everybody to pop themselves on mute. Nathan and Tom, if you could keep an eye on the chat, so if any questions come up during the sessions, we can pick it up. But I'll certainly I'll basically pick up questions at the very end. So it might be easier to leave them to the end, but happy to pick them up as we go through. I don't know if you spotted Tom has just clicked the recording, so I just wanted to double check that everybody's happy to be in on a session that's being recorded. Speak now, as they say, or forever hold your peace if you're not. Let's assume you all are okay with it being recorded then in that case. So good morning to the session. As Tom's just suggested, I'm from Sicon, so we are a third-party developer. We do a number of different applications. Manufacturing is just one of those, and for those of you who don't know, Sage have now taken on board our solution as their solution that they are selling on their marketplace. So it's essentially going to be a replacement, or it is, should I say, a replacement to your current Sage manufacturing solution. So I guess the purpose of today is really just about giving you a taster session so you can see the differences between your current solution and essentially what you could potentially do. So we're dangling that carrot, if you like, to this morning to show you what you could be doing with our solution as an alternative. What I would suggest that we do after today is, if it is something that you feel that can help you, we organise a one-to-one session with you where potentially I can always set up an example of your own bill of material so it can help you to understand a little bit better how it can fit into your environment. Right, let me figure out how to share my screen. So bear with me 2 seconds, make sure I'm sharing the right screen. So hopefully everybody should be seeing Sage 200 in front of them. Has that come through okay for everybody?
Yep, I can see that.
Yeah, okay, lovely. Thanks, Tom. So you'll see on the bottom left-hand corner that work order processing and material planning just simply sit as integrated modules, just like Sage Manufacturing. So it's going to link to standard Sage sales order processing. It's going to link to purchase order processing, obviously to stock, and it's also going to link to your bill of materials. Now, I'm quite mindful, you all know about bill of materials, all know about works order processing. So as I said, what I'll do is I'll generate a works order, but we'll concentrate today on the difference between what you're doing within Sage Manufacturing and how our solution can help you. What I'd also like to do is very briefly dip into 2 other applications for you this morning. The first of which is called shop floor data capture. And that's essentially an app that can run on a tablet or a phone, or most customers tend to have monitors in each of their production areas. And the whole purpose is for your staff to be able to clock on, for them to capture the progression of that works order, but also capture the labour time, whether it's from a costing perspective or a payroll calculation perspective, but also give them the ability to capture inspections during those operation processes, or indeed at the very end when you book in the finished item. The other one, as I mentioned, is barcoding. So that very simple way of being able to book stock in, be able to allocate to works orders, be able to issue, be able to book that finished item back in, but also, of course, be able to move stock around and be able to dispatch it. So hopefully by the end of this morning's session, you'll see we have a complete end-to-end solution for you. Right, no more talking, let's actually crack on. So as I said, we basically link to standard Sage bill of materials. So I'm going to pick up and I'm going to generate a works order. Now, there's various ways we can generate a works order. If you are making for an order, then we're simply going to do this through standard Sage, as I said, sales order processing, but you can also make for stock, whether that's just simply creating a works order within the module, or as you'll see later on when we come to run material planning, there's the ability to make a suggestion where you've perhaps dropped below your stock level. So we can make for stock and we can make for to order, or both, of course. So let me come and add on that combi controller. And apologies that doesn't probably bear any resemblance to rifles and food testing equipment and your instruments. So my apologies, but as I said, we can always do a more tailored session for you. So I'm going to make 100 of those today, and we'll pop in our price. And as I said, all we're basically doing now is we're generating that works order, and I can do that in one of a couple of ways. So I can either say at this point, I want to generate my works order, as you can see, or you can just simply get the sales order on, and as you'll see in a second, we can then say, right, well, show me all of the sales orders that have a demand where I now need to manufacture something. So as you can see, there's my generate works orders, and essentially all I'm doing is saying, right, show me all of those sales orders that have a promise date between that date range. And there we go, there's my good old combi controller. Now, for those of you who do sub-assemblies, I know one of the usual typical issues that I hear from customers like yourselves is having that association between a sub-assembly that you're manufacturing and the main item that you're manufacturing. So you'll see when we come and create a sub-assembly in a moment, there is that association. So you always know that's why you're manufacturing it. And there's a couple of ways that we can generate those sub-assemblies, as you're seeing here. So the first is basically saying, do you want to create a brand new one? Or do you want to use some sub-assemblies that you've already got in stock? Well, clearly I don't have any in stock. Or you may have a works order where you're already manufacturing some sub-assemblies, in which case, do you want to use one of those? Or is it something that you buy as a sub-assembly, in which case we can pick up an existing purchase order? So I'm just going to basically say, let's generate that as a sub-assembly. And as you'll see in my list for you in a moment, there's that association that I was talking about a second. Now, for any of you who might do any on-site work, one of the advantages of this is that it does link to projects as well. And like Sage Manufacturing and project accounting, there's that association. So if you've got one contract for a customer and perhaps you want to roll up multiple works orders, there's the ability to be able to report at 2 different levels. Or indeed, as I said, if you're doing any on-site work, I suspect it's probably not relevant to guns, but maybe for I don't know, for Aberystwyth with other instruments, then that might be relevant for you. So there's my works order created, and if we come and have a look now at our works order list, you'll see that we now have, sorry, it would help actually if I look at my works order list instead of my bill of materials list. There we go, there's our top level of our combi controller, and there's our sub-assembly. So straight away I can see that we have that association because it's just simply has a /1. And I can see the sales order that's associated to, and I can see the customer that's associated to. Now, all we're basically doing here is we're pulling through from a standard Sage bill of materials. But the benefit that we now have over and above standard Sage manufacturing and bill of materials is the flexibility to make changes at any point to those components up to when we book the finished item in. So again, typically when I talk to customers, like any one of you, you might end up having to use more or less components because you might have scrap or for whatever reason. It's just really about giving you that flexibility to make a change. So that could be that we end up using more of those components. And you'll see that it forces me to pop in a reason as to why I've made a change. You can have whatever reason you like in there, by the way. And it's always going to maintain the original quantity. And as you can see, I've now got the new quantity with a reason, which I can then report on. So why do we end up using more components? Was it we've got a problem in production? Was it the quality of the items coming in? I can add a component. So obviously linking to standard Sage stock now. I've got the ability to delete. Now, this isn't changing your original bill of materials. This is purely for this particular build. And in exactly the same way that we can change the components, we can also underbook or overbook. Again, something that standard Sage doesn't give you the ability to do. So it's really about saying, well, we ended up making more or less when we came to that finished item. I can remove, as I said, a line, or I could just simply substitute for an alternative item. So as you all know, in standard Sage, you've got that ability to set up alternate items. And all I'm basically doing here is just swapping one out for the other. So if I did have, apologies, I don't have any set up, but if I did have some set up, they would just simply be listed here. And as I said, just swapping one out for the other. If there's any differential in the cost, it's simply going to update the cost up here for me. So there's my typical components that I use. I'm not doing anything around allocations, picking or issuing just yet. We'll come back to that in a moment. And there's our subassembly, which I can now drill back into to see that as a separate works order. So again, that real-time association and links between the two. So there's my subassembly with its own components. Now, for those of you who use operations within standard Sage bill of materials, basically all we're doing is, again, we're pulling that through into our works order. These, again, are completely adjustable. So if you wanted to edit the time or the operation, all we're simply doing is populating that through, but again, giving you that flexibility to make changes to this bill for whatever reason. The big difference, as you'll see later on, is this can now tie into that shop floor data capture app that I mentioned. So if we want to see the progression of that works order, I had a classic example of one poor lady who used to spend half her time chasing around production, trying to work out where the works orders were because she'd get customers on the phone chasing her. So she'd say, I'll call you back, chase around production, go back to the office, call the customer back. Now she just has the screen that she can see exactly where that is. So she's got a quicker way of being able to identify how much longer it's going to take to give a more accurate lead time to the customer. The other thing that you'll see is that it's then going to automatically update how much actual time. So again, for those of you who wanted to have a look at capturing the amount of time it's actually taken you, I think, Purdy's, you were looking, James, you were looking at being able to do this potentially as an import. This is picking up that actual amount of time from your shop floor data capture app. You can add that in. So all we're simply doing is we're picking up the estimate time from your bill of materials, and it's then going to pick up the cost rate against that individual. So if you've got staff with different cost rates, then it's going to associate their cost rate when that's captured through the app for you. Now you'll see, again, big difference between Sage Manufacturing is the whole ease of scheduling. I often find that customers are trying to do that manually on separate diaries because, you know, it's not easy in Sage, and 9 times out of 10 customers don't even use the pre-actor. So when we come into the scheduling later on, you'll see that this automatically drops into our planning tool, and there's various ways that I can look at that data. Exactly the same on your machinery. So I'm finding more and more customers now want to be able to plan the machinery. Now, how much machine time have we got, and how much demand of the works orders do we have? And actually, do we have sufficient enough machinery time available to be able to deliver those jobs on time based on our suggested delivery time to the customer? For those of you who may ship out to a third-party subcontractor during your production process, pretty much the same as standard Sage, we can do all of that. Comments in history, pretty self-explanatory really. We're just giving you a quick audit trail. But another big difference is the ability to book in multiple finished completed items. Now, when I say a multiple finished item, I'm not talking about the quantity. I'm saying you might make a byproduct as an example. So it could be that you've ended up with some extra components or ingredients and you end up making something else. This is giving you that flexibility to add on an additional finished item, split the cost, and then from a stock control perspective, you'll see that you've got those 2 or 3 separate items. Attachment's pretty self-explanatory. Again, this is the big difference between standard Sage, is we are ring fencing that finished item to that sales order. So we always have those associations. But similarly, as I mentioned earlier on, we are pre-allocating, we are ring fencing that sub-assembly to that top level. Now, as you know, standard Sage within bill of materials gives you the ability to have a kind of almost like an inbuilt scrap buffer percentage. But in addition to that, we also give you the ability to add scrap at the end of the process. So whether it's wastage, whatever you've ended up with, obviously you're capturing it and then you're popping in a cost and the quantity and again a reason. So giving you that ability to be able to report on why you ended up with scrap at the very end of the process. So that's kind of like the starting point. As I said, there's various ways in which we can allocate stock, but we've also got the ability to unissue. So all the way through the process, I can part allocate, I can unissue, I can issue. We can either allocate our stock in here. We've got a very simple summary screen where we can do our allocations. We can even, as you'll see when we come and book stock in, we can even do our allocations at the point of where we book the stock in, which again is different to standard Sage. So you'll see when we come and book this stock in, that it shows us straight away why do we order that stock. So you're never going to be in a position where you receive stock in and it gets pinched elsewhere because somebody didn't know that it was for the purpose of that production run. So again, that's another big difference. We can pick and we can issue through the barcoding device. Our other option is we can do a back flushing. I don't know if that's something that any of you do through standard Sage manufacturing. So all we're simply doing with back flushing is saying, I'm not going to allocate pick and issue up front. I'm going to book that in as a finished item. And it's just a quick wizard that runs through the process of booking that in and taking out of stock all of these individual items. And again, that could be done through barcoding. So a really quick and simplistic way of doing everything electronically, moving away from manual processes for you. Right, let's come out of the works order and let's come and show you how all of that can be planned when it comes to our planning of our jobs and planning of course, of our stock. So this gives us the ability to run a routine, as you can see. And again, the difference between this is that I'm not having to kick anybody out of Sage. I'm not having to run it overnight because it's really slow. Again, when I talk to customers, that's usually a big bugbear of theirs is, you know, you're trying to run it, but you can't because other people are using Sage. So what's happening here is it's going to make a suggestion of works orders. So that could be that you have a demand on a sales order to manufacture something, or it could be that you've dropped below your minimum stock level. So it's going to make a suggestion, but it's also then going to show you why it's making that suggestion. The next thing that it's going to do is it's going to give you a suggested purchase orders. It is only a suggestion, it's not set in stone, but it's going to look at your preferred supplier's lead time. It's going to look at your minimum, maximum stock levels. It's also going to look at, again, the demand. So have we dropped below that minimum stock? Do we have a demand on a works order or on a sales order? And it'll make that suggestion. But again, as you'll see when we come into that screen, it's a much more informative screen as to why it's making that suggestion. big bugbear of customers that are using material planning and Sage Manufacturing is they never know why it's making the suggestion. So they're having to unpick it and go into so many different other screens to try and work out why it's making that suggestion. Now, another big difference between what we can do and what Sage can do is we can also import a forecast, whether that's an additional demand on top of the sales orders and works orders, or it could be linking into another application that we have called distribution, where you want to import maybe a customer's demand. So they're giving you advanced visibility of perhaps something that they're going to be ordering, but they're not ready to place a committed order just yet. So there we go. It's telling me that I've got a load of works orders overdue. And it's also then given me a suggestion of things that we could rearrange to fulfill the demands. Now, another big difference between standard Sage is we have something called suggested stock transfers. And this is typically quite useful and helpful for those of you who perhaps have a bulk warehouse storage location, or maybe a large warehouse where you're going to keep the majority of your stock in the main area, but you might want to keep a certain amount of stock in your production area, so a bin location. So all we're doing is we're setting up minimum stock levels at bin locations. So if you drop below that bin location minimum level, it'll just make a suggestion and we can create a stock transfer. That can be done through here, or again, we can do that electronically through the barcoding device. For those of you who have traceable items, this gives you, so if you've got sort of sell by dates, I'm just trying to think, just trying to think whether any of you might have this, but I'll pick it up anyway, just in case. So in addition to looking at our minimum stock levels and the stock that we have as a demand, this is also going to highlight if you do have any stock on the shelf that's exceeded its sell by and use by date. Because clearly, from a stock purchasing planning perspective, we need to be replacing that stock that's on the shelf that's out of date. So it's also going to take that into account for you, and as you can see, highlight which ones of those are out of date. So we talked about our suggested works orders, and as I said, this is where it's going to pick up and tell me where I need to be manufacturing anything, and we've got some sub-assemblies in there. We've got the quantity of the items that we need to be manufacturing. And again, big difference to standard Sage is it's going to show me if I actually have some availability or not. Well, clearly we've got a big problem there, which is highlighting to me in red. And it's just simply highlighting to me why and where the issue is. Well, we've got an issue with that stock. We haven't got sufficient enough stock available. So we've clearly got a shortage and the predicted next available date. So again, it makes it really quick and simple to identify where there may be a problem. Now, I've also got these extended stock balance screens, which again, customers find particularly useful. So this is where it's giving me real-time visibility now on where my stock is at. So it's not just about seeing how much we can visually see on the shelf, it's showing us how much actual free stock we have available, taking into account those allocations first of all. So that's allocations against a works order. I can drill down to see those works orders specifically. It could be that we've allocated a works order. So that's just simply showing me I have a demand. I haven't even allocated anything just yet. But if I have allocated anything, I'd be able to see that. Or it could be we've allocated an individual component to a sales order. And again, I can see that. But I can also see it at bin location. And I've also got the ability to be able to see some, I'll come and show you a different version of that in a second, but I can see my stock movements. And as you'll see when we come into an individual stock item in a moment, that detail of where it's gone to and where it's at is just an awful lot easier, I think, than the standard Sage stock screen. So working along the screen, we can see when we need to start it and when it's due. But I can also see now, why is it making that suggestion? So it's what we call our inners and outers. So we can see our minimum stock level. Where you have minimum and maximum batch size production runs, it's going to take that into account. And of course, it's going to up it. The suggestion is going to up it to that min-max batch size run. And it's also going to take into account your production lead time. So yeah, we've got a works order coming in to bring our balance back up to 10. And we've got another one for 5 that's going to bring my balance up to 15 now. And there's my works orders. But we've got those works orders going out with that demand. That's the sales order number, and that's the customer. So it really is showing you what's going in, what's going out. And that's essentially why it's given me that suggestion that we need to manufacture 93 to bring my minimum stock level balance back up to 100 again. And then all I'm simply doing is creating my works orders, and that will basically generate a works order for me back in my works order list. So, as I said, as easy as that. Suggested purchase orders is pretty much the same. So once again, looking at my lead time, when we need it by, our own stock code and description, but a big difference is we can also pull through your supplier's part number as well. So if you do have if your supplier has a different part number to you, when it produces the purchase order, it's going to produce it in their part number as opposed to yours. Again, how much quantity is it suggesting? But it is very much a suggestion. Nothing is set in stone, so we can still change that. Once again, we can see our current free stock. And again, I can see that stock item balances. And if I come to the history now, that's a bit of a better screen for you. So we can see our stock movement. So what's coming internal to a works order issue and the works order number. Have we allocated it? Is it an adjustment on a purchase order? So I think certainly when I talk to customers, that stock item history, which is available in various other places, by the way, is a lot more detailed than the standard Sage screen. So again, I can see, so we've seen free stock allocated and what's on order. That's my preferred supplier, but very simply, I can change it to another one. So as you can see, these are now showing me all of my suppliers that are on Sage. But in addition to that information, again, a big difference to standard Sage manufacturing is I've now got some historical purchasing analysis. So how much have we purchased month to date, year to date, and the last 12 months? So it gives us a better feel on how much we ought to be ordering. And then, as I mentioned, the reason, just like the suggested works order. And this is by far one of the biggest pain points when I talk to customers like yourselves, as I mentioned earlier on, is that assessment. Well, why is it telling me that I need to be ordering that quantity? So once again, looking at my minimum level, looking at the free stock and my inners and outers. And potentially, if we do have a forecast that we've imported, you will see forecast line. Now, I won't go through the other modules today, but I guess just talking about the bigger picture, I mentioned that we can link to other modules, one of which is distribution. So if any of you import any stock from abroad with very long lead times, we can do things like container tracking. So that's really the purpose of that red line here, is it's highlighting to me that there is a delay in that PO coming in. So it just helps you to manage stock coming in, and of course the impact that that may have to orders and jobs that you're about to do. Now, another big difference to Sage manufacturing for those of you who need to authorize those POs before you place them with your supplier is this can link to another application that we have. I did say that we have multiple applications. So this links to another app that we have called WAP. So WAP Purchase Requisitions is simply going to ping an automatic email notification out to as many people as you like to authorize that electronically. So I get an email with a hyperlink. It says, you have some requisitions awaiting approval. I click on an approve, and potentially, as I said, it can go through to more people. Once it's fully approved, that's the point where it'll produce it on standard Sage purchase order processing. So that's an extension to the core kind of, if you like, the core material planning. So let's come and produce a couple of purchase orders so you can see this in action. So select all. It's automatically ring fence those stock items. So as I was talking about earlier on, if we are generating that because we needed that for a works order specifically, when we come and book it in, we know straight away that was the purpose. So very quickly, generate my purchase order, and any second now you'll see a purchase order in standard Sage purchase order processing. So from that perspective, appreciate it's not really much different to standard Sage, but we do have a big difference here. So you'll see that we have an additional material planning tab. So once again, we have those associations. So why did we order this stock? Well, that's the stock line, and those are my reasons. So straight away, I can see the works orders that that purchase was for. And of course, if that was for sales order, we'd see the sales order number and the customer. If it was also for forecasting purpose or perhaps minimum stock level to increase your minimum stock, all of that would be listed in here. But it just means, as I said earlier on, that if there is a delay in those stock coming in, you know straight away and you can react accordingly to know which jobs it's likely to affect. Similarly, I can see the pre-allocation. So which works orders were we ring fencing that stock to? Again, for those of you who do import stock from abroad, again, this can link to that distribution module that I was talking about, where we can track if that stock's been confirmed on the containers and we can mark problems, but that is an additional module. So let's save that. We've got our purchase order now in on the system, nice and simple. We'll come and book that stock in later on, but I just simply want to come and show you, first of all, as part of MRP, the capacity planning. So big difference I find to Sage Manufacturing. So straight away, I've got very quick high-level overview on if I've got any peaks and troughs. So all I've done in the background is I've very simply popped in my labour availability and my machine availability. So that could be at team level, it could be at specific employee level, it could be groups of machines or even individual machines. And you'll see very easily now, I can see, as I said, where my peaks and troughs are. And I can see that I have, just under 41 hours worth of labour time. And that's now showing me the labour time as to what it's made up of. And again, I can drill down to see that works order specifically if I wanted to. So quick, easy screens that I can drill back in to have a look at. So that's typically where most production managers tend to look at initially, because it really is about seeing, there we go, there's the works order, where my peaks and troughs are. But we can also come into more of a diary view now. So whether that's at the higher works order level, so I can see all of those works orders that have dropped in. So I'm not having to schedule anything. As you can see, it's just automatically now dropped in that combi boiler works order. But I could drag and drop and move that out really simply. So I can see through the diary all my works orders. I can also see that at my operation level as well. So if I come to my operation diary now, so you'll see there's my operations. And again, I can drag and drop that out. And it's probably worthwhile mentioning that if I was to try and drag those out to a date where I didn't have sufficient availability, it's just going to flag it up for me. And if I have any associated operations, as an example, where I can't do operation 3 without doing operation 1 and 2, it'll just flag it up that you need to move moving the other 2 as well as that one. Exactly the same on sub-assembly. So if I tried to move a sub-assembly out and I needed to manufacture that first before I did the finished item, it's just going to highlight the fact that you can't do that. So just nice, simple warnings to make sure that we don't make those mistakes. We're all human at the end of the day. So again, I've got a team level. So if you do have teams, I can see that at the different team levels. So again, it'll just simply highlight to me the different teams. Employee level or machine level. So you can look at that in various different views. Now, the advantage of the employee level is that I can also add in additional things like holidays and sick leave as an example. So any period of absences. So of course, the whole benefit of that is you're seeing your actual availability. Now you could do that manually. Again, we do have that web platform that I mentioned earlier on called WAP, where you can generate holidays electronically. Once they're approved, they will automatically drop into the diary for you. So again, it's about extending all of your business processes. Now, I can see straight away those operations that are overdue. So we've clearly got an awful lot of operations that are due here by the different types of labour. So that's the kind of different diary view. But we've also got some dashboards, and these are completely configurable, by the way. So I'm just going to give you a feel on a couple of dashboards. So clearly the whole purpose of dashboards are giving you multiple bits of information on the same screen. So as long as it's information that we're capturing, then clearly we can report on it in a dashboard. So that's just, as I said, one example of a dashboard. So I can see all of my works orders and I can see the quantity booked and where we're at with it. Right, let's go to the production department now, shall we? So I'm going to be one of your members of staff in production now, and we need to be clocking on to that job. So you'll see, hopefully now, I come to shop floor data capture, you should hopefully be seeing a tablet in front of you now. And for those of you who can see me on the screen, I've simply got a little tablet, as I said. Most companies tend to have monitors in each of their production areas that your staff can clock onto. The way in which this works is all I basically do is I clock onto my shop floor data capture app. And this is quite useful, by the way, for just a very simple clocking in, clocking out as well into the building. So I guess for fire regulation purposes. So it's not just limited to your production area. But all I'm simply doing here is clocking on. There's my combi controller, and it's going to show me the job that I need to work on. So we're not having to send bits of paper, job sheets down to production now. It's all going to automatically pull through. So I can see the quantity that I need to manufacture in the finished item. I can see how many operations we have and the number of hours have been planned, the start date and the end date, and then the sales order that's associated to. And then all I'm basically doing is I'm clocking onto the operation. So that operation could be a machine operation or it could be a labour operation. So it would help if I actually click start, wouldn't it? So a bit of a countdown moment, the clock is ticking away. And as you'll see when we get to a minute, because I've got it locked down that I've got to capture a minute, that I've got the ability then to pause it. So I can pause it for a number of different reasons, completely configurable. It could be that we've got a problem with the machine, or I'm just simply having a break or going to lunch. But you'll see when we pause it, I can pop in how many I've actually completed so far. So you'll see when we come back into the module, we've now got real-time visibility as to where that job is and how much has actually been completed to date. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can capture an inspection process. And this is completely configurable, by the way. So you could have a tick box, you could have a predefined drop-down list, it could be a date field, you can even take a photo and attach something. So if that inspection process is really important to you, then again, we can include that. So I'm going to say I've made one of those. And as I said, we can pause it and it will now pop up with, so we can now capture an inspection process potentially. Sorry, I've gone and chosen one where I didn't have an inspection against it, but I can now capture an inspection process against that potentially. So we can now see it's changed to blue. So we've got 33% of that done so far and the amount of time. And if I now come back into the module, you'll see, there we go, completed one. If I come to the labour tab, you'll see, we can see that Sarah has done some time and the amount of time. And if I had a rate set up, obviously it would automatically pull through the cost for me. So nice and simple. Now, there is also the ability, if you wanted to allow your staff to add stock through that device as well. Some staff don't, some customers don't want to allow that, but that's an option in there as well if you wanted to. So we've generated that purchase order. Of course, at this point, I've got a couple of ways that I can now book that stock in. So I can either do that through standard Sage purchase order processing, and I wanted to show you this so you can see the fact that we do have visibility of, so if I come and do a goods received, so you'll see if we come to, just trying to think one of the BGT, did I organize one? Select all. So can you see straight away, I can see the sales order that those jobs were pre-allocated to and where relevant any works orders. So it really is about at the point where you book it in, you know exactly which jobs this is related to. And I can even drill down through that hyperlink to see the works order as well if I wanted to. And at this point, I can simply do my usual, popping it in, select all, and I can receive the selected. And then I can allocate those at the same point. So I don't have to allocate it through in the works order. I can just simply allocate it at this point as well if I wanted to. And it will just simply process it in the normal standard Sage way as you're used to, but it's automatically now popping up how many I want to allocate, which I can change if I wanted to. So as I said, it's going through that allocation now of all of those items. Easy as that. Come and show you the barcoding in a moment, how we can book that in through barcoding. Now, the other option, as I mentioned, is back flushing. So I come to my sub-assembly. I'll show you how easy this is. So very simply, I can book a finished item in. And then, as I said, it will just simply take all of that stock out. So this is the point where if we do have an inspection, I can do it through here. Or as I said, we can do it through the device. So pop in the dates, go to 20, would help if I popped in the right dates. Complete inspection, yes, it's passed. And then all I'm doing, as I said, is booking in the quantity. So this is where if we've allowed it, we can over or underbook. And as I mentioned earlier on, we can pop in any scrap and the scrap reason. Save. It's now going to go through a wizard to take out of stock all of those individual items and book in the finished item. So as you can see, it's allocating and issuing really simply. And there we go. Next, book in the finished item. Job done. So we now have that sub-assembly sitting on the shelf, and it's now taken all of those individual items out of stock. And as I said, that's something that you can do through barcoding as well. But we can also return the stock back in again. So it is really about giving you that flexibility as well. I won't go through the same on that top level, but you get the general gist about that. So let's very quickly come and show you the barcoding again, so you can see how all of that can tie in as well. I won't go through a full barcoding demo, just to really more about giving you a quick feel and a flavour. So once again, this links directly through to standard Sage purchase order processing, obviously a stock, sales order processing, but it also, as you can see further on down, it links to works orders. So I can come and pick an issue and book in the finished item through here, or as I mentioned, I can come and do a back flushing through here as well. Now we've also got the ability to do a disassemble, which I don't think standard Sage can do. So if you buy in finished items and you need to break that down into individual components, we can do a reverse of a build as well. So very simply, I'm just going to book something in. So let's book in that final one that we have. And all I'm basically doing is I'm saying, yep, I am typical, go and choose one that isn't going to be relevant. So in this instance, I can either key in the quantity, And if we do have batch traceable items, it'll force me to put in a reason with the details. And if you do inspect anything when they come in, it'll force me to do an inspection process. So I can't use these items, and I certainly can't dispatch any of these items unless they've passed inspection. So they'll simply go into inspection bin location. If they failed, they'll go into a dedicated quarantine location as well. So again, there's no way of you being able to use it. I can take a photo of the item and store that against the PO. Otherwise, I could print a label. So don't worry, I know we call it barcoding, but if you do have suppliers who send you items with no barcode labels on, as you've just seen me do, I can just simply key in the quantity and then print the label. And then all I'm doing my GRN, and that will then automatically receive those in. And then, of course, I can put them away. So that's now automatically updated Sage to say that we've now put them away. As I said, the inspection process, let me grab so imagine you've got barcode labels all around in your bin locations and in your warehouses. So I'm going to scan my bin location that I have some inspection processes against. And it's as simple, how many have I passed and how many have I failed? And as I said, those failed ones will then go into that specified quarantine location. I'll just very quickly do a works order. So again, you can see the works order. So that's a works order that we had. That's my sub-assembly. And typical, can't pick from that location. All we're basically doing is we're saying, what's the quantity? Sorry, let me come and choose another one. Allocated. So I've picked and booked that one in. It's just typical. Let's come and find another one. There we go. So that's my works order. Those are my lines that I need to pick. And all I'm saying is that's my bin location that I need to go and pick it from. Picked. Same on my second one. Picked. So all we're now doing is saying, yeah, I'm going to pick all of those. Yes. And I'm now going to issue them. So issued, and then I'm simply booking that finished item back in. So that's another mechanism. So there is that extension to what you're doing with standard Sage manufacturing to tie in your barcoding to help you manage all of your stock control electronically, as well as you saw, that shop floor data capture linking in, which you don't have at the moment. I guess I'm just trying to remember some of the other processes that I think that's probably about it on the differences between the main kind of key differences. So I think probably a good time to open up the session to see if anybody's got any questions. Everybody's very quiet. Are you still with me?
We were in-depth discussion. Sorry about that.
Oh, were you? That's a good thing then.
Nancy lunch question. Oh, she's finished. Okay, sorry. Because we're discussing the app for a second. I'm really sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Go on, Karen. What was your question?
Well, where do we start, basically? Where do we sign is the other one.
Quick, Tom, get your order book out.
I'll make sure of the check, but we'll be there. Okay, my first question is, we implemented last year a system of Kanban for controlling our stock.
Okay.
How would that actually be able to be integrated into your manufacturing module in some way?
So did you say Kanban? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that handling all of your stock management? So you're not doing that in Sage? Is that what you mean? I have heard of it.
Yeah. It's handling the stock levels of our key components. So basically, it's a physical, visible system that says when you take this one away, there's a card that says go and order more. It's worked quite well, and our guys are keen on it. But on the flip side of that, as managers, we're keen to get that automated and off a visible system. So I'm assuming we could actually pull the two together so the visible system still works and it's reflected in Sage.
So in all honesty, depending upon what else that Kanban system does for you, Gavin, that's really what material planning is going to do. So material planning is going to look at those stock levels and it's going to make those suggestions. So you're duplicating the data. And of course, with our system, it's properly linking to work sort of processing back to bill of materials, which does Kanban do that for you?
Kanban says go and raise works orders. That's what Kanban says. It doesn't do it for you. So that's what we're trying to do. The guys are keen on it because it's very visual and very simple. We've never had success with Sage MRP ever.
Right.
We had issues with the initial install going back years that's caused some of our products to actually not work as expected.
Oh, really? Right. Okay.
Confidence was damaged in MRP, so we've never used it.
Right.
It worked, but people just didn't trust it. So that's one thing we can work around. Maybe I'm not sure. So
it's like Kanban on steroids, so I think.
Yes, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I was going to ask you about the graphical planner, but I think you demoed something similar. One of our biggest bottlenecks is the fact that it's a good thing to have. We are very, very busy, and we're struggling to get orders out the door because we physically have to make them from scratch at the moment.
Okay.
The graphical planner we looked at years ago, the Sage version, but we were told, well, it was hinted it was extremely complex.
It is.
We spend a vast amount of time with a scheduling spreadsheet, which basically means we have a list of everybody's hours and we plan what they're doing 4, 5, 6 weeks in advance, in fact months in advance.
Okay.
It looks to me that the graphical planner that you guys offer is exactly that, but in graphical form. Yes. And how easy is that to set up? Because we knew the graphical planner before was like, you'll take 8 months to even put the data in.
Yeah, I remember that, which is why, to be honest with you, a lot of business partners and a lot of customers just didn't even bother with it. It was almost a full-time job to do that. The quick answer is it's really simple to set up, and the system then runs itself from the perspective of you've got your availability time. It's then looking at your production lead time to do that bill of materials, which obviously then pulls through to the works order. So there's no scheduling as such, because as you saw, it's just automatically dropping into the diary. The only thing that you really need to do is the initial, how much estimated time do we have available, which it's a really simple way of doing it, and you can copy across to multiple weeks and multiple people, but with that flexibility then to move things around, but also add in, well, what's our downtime? And you can also, by the way, it's worth mentioning, you can put downtime on machinery as well. So if you've got machines out of action, there's also that potential to put that in the diary as well. Okay,
so for an example, we've just had a very large order in which we've spent 3 or 4 days of man hours trying to plan into the system. Now, we often have this kind of thing happen where we have to rejiggle the schedule to allow for larger orders on priority. Is it just simply a drag and drop?
It is, yeah. It's as simple as that. Yeah, it is as simple as that.
Yeah, it's too easy. No.
We don't believe in making life difficult. Life is difficult enough. So the simpler we can make the systems, the better for everybody.
Okay. Traceability.
Yes.
Now it's key to us, but our system has never worked particularly well, and we haven't got really confidence in it. What we need, which is key, which I don't think it might be part of your remit, I don't know, but we need to be able to trace a serial numbered item back to the batches that we bought from that actually constructed it. But also the flip side of that, which if we've got a component which we know has failed, we need a system to tell us what serial numbers and items are affected by it. Is that something that
it does? Good. Yeah. So have you got your stock items set up as traceable items at the moment, Kevin?
We have, but again, it's one of the things we've sort of know works, but we've never had any confidence in it.
Right. Okay. So as long, the key is you need to have the stock items set up as traceable items.
Yes, I'm pretty sure we have.
So at the point of where we use or issue, should I say, those stock items, we pick up the standard Sage process in, you either say this is the serial number I want you to go and pick, or you leave it up to the picker to tell you which ones that they're picking. And again, that can be done through barcoding, by the way. So you then have that full traceability of these are the components that I've used, which is linked back to the sales order where relevant. And this is the serial number of the finished item. So you do have that full traceability. And if you have a component that's failed, that's really the whole purpose of being able to add in, well, we ended up using more components because we had a problem with those components. So there is that full traceability for you.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. So we could trace a resistor, which we found out subsequently has failed, through to whatever builds all the way through to tell us where they've gone to.
Yes, precisely that. It is that full traceability from start to end.
Real. Okay.
All
yeah,
right.
That's great. Okay. Any
okay.
When can you come on?
Yeah, I think the first thing we need to do is really get you down here, or get a one-on-one demo arranged.
Yeah.
Ourselves. Sorry,
okay.
We're probably hogging the whole of the webinar.
No, that's fine. Don't worry. So what I'll do is I'll send through some dates to Tom after the session, and we can get a one-to-one set up for you, and pop through a sample, as I said, of a bill of materials. So in the next session, we can show it in your kind of terminology, which will make an awful lot more sense for you. All right, Kevin.
Really, really good.
So who wants to be next? Neogen or Purdy's? Any questions?
Steve from Neogen. I think I need to put this in front of a couple of other people, so
okay.
I'll probably reach out to Stephen Mungle at Eureka.
Okay.
And just arrange it again. Probably best over Teams because we're a split site.
Okay.
So I've got some people in Liverpool, some people in Bury, and there'll be obviously people in Ayr.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there'll be various stakeholders, but there's some very interesting bits and pieces in there. Well, the only question that I'm going to have, which will be a hot topic here, is I take it this all fully links into nominal, so all the stock movements and such are recorded in the nominal.
Yeah, it does. So we just set up a WIP. Yeah, so from a WIP posting perspective, you set up a WIP account, and it's at the point where you issue the stock, it does the stock movements in the background. So yeah, it's just standard Sage integration around that for you, Steve.
Cool. That's
so I'll send through some dates to Stephen then, and then he can liaise with you to get another session set up for you, Steve. Yeah, okay. And again, if you want to send through a sample bomb to Stephen, we can set up a unique sort of one for you as well, if you'd like.
It's difficult because we've got various different businesses under the Neogen umbrella who do very different things with bombs.
Okay, right, okay.
We're more than one company. It's unfortunate because we've got food safety based in Ayr, Rochdale, Liverpool. We've got animal safety based in Bury, and we've got food enzyme testing in Ireland. So,
okay, right, okay.
Admittedly, the Irish ones aren't in Sage 200 yet. They're still on Exchequer because we only bought them last year, but that's coming.
Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate that it's going to be a different bomb for animal testing to food testing. But as I said, if you want me to set one up that has a little bit more relevance than a combi display board or a kitchen bill of materials, more than happy to do that for you anyway. Yep. Purdy's, Sadat or James, do you have any questions? Sorry, Steve, did you have any more questions? Apologies.
No.
Perfect. Okay.
I have a few questions, but I'll let James go first.
Okay, all right. James, fire away.
Well, my main question is the one that you've just answered, which was the linkage into the nominal ledger. But yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it all looks very promising. It does an awful lot more than we currently use and would potentially use, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, we're a very low volume, high bespoke manufacturing facility, so we kind of need to be able to bend things to work for us. So I guess we'd really need to have a meeting with you one-on-one where we can kind of run through the idiosyncrasies of our business and see how it works for us. Yeah,
that's not a problem. Again, repeat what I've just said to the other two companies. When you say high bespoke, is it that it's more a variation on a theme, or is it that every single component is different? So I was looking at all your different guns on your on your website.
It's a bit of both. I mean, it depends what level you look at. Yeah, all we make is guns, but within that there is like every gun is different. There's different sizes. There's different ways that the barrels are made. It's unending in terms of what the customers can do to bespoke their guns, and depending on what they choose. Some parts are interchangeable, others are not. And so when I say low volume, we're talking 50 to 60 units a year, but they take 2 years to make. And then we manufacture the components in-house. So we kind of run two sets of whip. Well, actually 3, but we have the actual guns that we build, then we have the machine shop that makes all the components, and then we also have a service and repair line. All 3 run through works orders. So as I say, it's very unusual, and it's highly kind of bespoke, so we'd need to really talk through how we can make it work for us.
Yeah, so in your instance, I guess, James, we have 2 options, which is really why I was asking the question, is it a variation on a theme? So most customers sort of say they're bespoke, but in reality, it is just you have a standard sort of finished item, or standard component, should I say, but some of the components are different. So clearly that's bill of materials linking to works order processing. But we do have, in addition to that, or instead of that, another application called projects that allows you to say, well, the finished item is completely unique, but also each of the components are specifically unique to that build. So it just means you're not having to set up a bill of materials, because that's really not relevant, because you might not manufacture that ever again, because it is very specific to that customer's requirements. So it might be worthwhile getting into a little bit more detail specifically for you, James, around whether that might be suitable for those instances.
I think we're probably looking at works orders rather than projects, because although they're highly bespoke, like for example, every gun has an action in it. Now there's about 50 different variants of that, depending on what type of gun the customer chooses. So there's kind of 50 product lines to choose from for that one component that goes into the gun. That's the same for most of the other components, but they are all stocked, built in-house and stocked in the storeroom.
Right, got you. Okay. It's probably also worthwhile mentioning, you just touched on, you've got service and repair line. We do have another system, funnily enough, I did say we do more than manufacturing, that can handle that for you. Again, dependent upon how much information you need to collect, but we do also have a system that can hook into that, whether it's our full service suite, or whether it's just a service within our CRM that handles case management for you. So it might be worthwhile just picking up on that in the next session as well, then, James, and Sadat, for you. Okay. So any other questions, Sadat? You said you'll wait for James to answer the question.
Yeah. We're actually using Salesforce as our CRM.
Oh, are you? Okay.
And then we actually take the orders in Salesforce using Sales Cloud. To take the guns order. So how it actually moves, each order creates a project, and then it has broken down tasks, as James was saying, barrel, action, stock, etc. So first question is there any import functionality that we could use in Sicon, where you just download a CSV from Salesforce to actually create those works order in Sicon?
Quick answer is no. So you would just simply be pushing, and I'll leave Tom and the Eureka team to talk about potential integration between Salesforce and standard Sage 200. You would just simply be pulling through from Salesforce the sales order itself. And then, as you saw earlier on, I can either say, right, create me a works order off the back of those sales orders that have a finished item, or run material planning to make that suggestion. But quick answer is no. We don't have any links to Salesforce from manufacturing.
Okay. Second piece is you mentioned about a particular app where the craftsmen in our factory could potentially log their time that how much they're spending.
Mm-hmm.
Is that so? How does the app connect it to Sage, because it's an on-prem environment?
Yeah, so it's all going to sit on your server. It connects via one Sage Web Connector license. So we don't need a full Sage license, and no matter how many users you have running through shop floor data capture, it's just that real-time link, as I said, through that one Sage Web Connector license, which again, the Eureka team can quote you on. If you don't already have one, it's quite possible you might, depending on what version of Sage you're on, so that you might already have one in place.
Yeah.
But you're not talking about a huge amount of money to link.
Okay. So another one, the historical data. So we're currently using Sage Manufacturing. So when we plug in Sicon, does that data get like ETL goes inside Sicon, or it stays in manufacturing? How does it work?
So we're able to link the data together. So if you do have any open works orders, that's just simply going to link together. So we don't need to do any data migration because we've basically linked the tables automatically for you. And then obviously any new works orders would then be created in our module specifically. So you would have visibility of any existing works orders within our application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And pretty much the last one, I think. The app standpoint, you've got the core one is the manufacturing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you also, if we want that time tracking element, does that cover the same app, or we need to bring? So how many apps would we need to start with?
Okay, so from day one, you'd need your work sort of processing and your material resource planning. So those are the two modules as the core modules within Sage 200. You can, but you don't have to from day one. You can then add on the shop floor data capture app. That's an additional application. So the shop floor data capture app, as I said, can give you your progression. It can do inspection processes, and it can capture the labour time from a costing and a payroll calculation perspective. But as I said, you don't have to do that from day one. Okay. And then if you want to do barcoding, whether it's just to link to standard sales order processing and purchase order processing, as well as works order, that's an additional app that you can add on at a later date, or actually start off with barcoding. More often than not, when I talk to customers, they want to get themselves to a position where their stock records are accurate. So what they tend to do is get barcoding in first, but just use it for stock take purposes from day one. So when they implement works orders, it's almost like having a fresh, clean slate, so to speak, and then start to introduce all of the other areas of barcoding once they've implemented works order processing and MRP.
Okay.
But
so
you could do it either way around. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So we're looking at potentially 4 apps to start with.
So works on processing and MRP comes together. Okay. But yes, the barcoding and then the shop floor data capture are an additional 2. So yeah, total of 3.
Perfect. And with regards to pricing and all of that, do we talk to Tom about it? Or?
Yeah, so if you talk to Tom, it's all based on subscription. So the work sort of processing and MRP are module based, so it doesn't matter how many, it's not user based. Shop floor data capture is a module plus named users. So if you liaise with the Eureka team on how many users you think you might need in production.
Yep.
Similarly, barcoding, that's a named user plus the module. So they can liaise with you around the number of users and then provide you with a quote.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we just need to do a one-to-one.
Yeah, of course.
With you, and I'm very much interested in that shop floor data capture app.
Okay.
And it would be good to see it in action from the broader perspective. So.
Yeah, of course, that's not a problem at all. Well, as I said, today was really about giving you sort of a very quick high-level overview to highlight the kind of the main key differences. So hopefully that's achieved that for the purpose of today. And I will leave you to liaise with Tom and Stephen around quotes and organising one-to-one demonstrations. So I don't know if anybody has any further questions before we finish off.
Yeah.
No, I think the questions raised by the guys fantastic. It's answered some of ours as well. So
good. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I can see it would bring quite a lot to us, and it'll make our life a lot easier, which is what we're after.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. All for that at the end of the day. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining anyway, and look forward to catching up with you again fairly shortly anyway.
That sounds
Sarah,
great.
Thank you.
Could we have a copy of this recording?
Oh yes, that's a good point. Could you do the same for us?
Yeah, Nathan, do you want to organise that?
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all.
I've got a few other people who would be very interested in seeing this, I think.
Yeah, okay, lovely. Right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sarah, and thanks
Take
everyone
care,
for joining.
everybody. You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.